Hey, John, this is Steve Davis here. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
This is kind of weird doing
Yeah.
that like this. So you've got a book out.
Yeah.
Actually, I saw you got two books out, but we're here to talk about Drawn into Danger.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm just going to ask you a couple quick questions about it. First off, where can people find it?
You can download it on Kindle, and then you can also buy it at Amazon.com. So, and I think I dropped the price down a little bit on both, trying to keep it cheaper so that if a teacher wants to buy it, use it in their classroom library, something like that, they can
Sure.
have it. So
Is it available on Apple's iBook store yet also, or no?
I don't really know. I haven't
Okay.
actually. I hadn't really thought much about it.
Okay.
And that's kind of I got to be honest, marketing, publicizing, that kind of stuff is my weakest area when it comes to, because doing the whole author thing.
Sure, sure. Okay, well, why write this book?
The story behind it is kind of complicated. The initial idea of doing a superhero memoir was something that had popped into my head when I was actually training for a marathon a few years back. And you're alone with your thoughts for a long time. One of the strategies to get past the mental hurdle of being by yourself for 4 hours or whatever was to think through plot lines and to think through characters. And so initially I had this picture in my head of a superhero memoir, but the characters were all adults. And then later on I kind of asked, actually I'm more interested in who they were when they were younger, when they were in that initial phase of becoming superheroes. And then what happened was we were planning a play for our classroom. And my students asked if I could model for them, the whole exposition, plot, climax, rising action, all that kind of stuff. So I modeled it, how you would come up with it. And I kind of just started putting up this idea on the board of a superhero, someone who was training to become a superhero, what that would look like. And it hit a lot of themes that I care about: authenticity, the way we wear masks, the pressure that's on kids to perform. All of these themes that I cared about kind of wrapped up in this superhero metaphor. And then again, it was just in the back of my head, and the students started planning an entirely different play that had nothing to do with what I talked about, but this was always in the back of my head. And then in November, somebody talked about this project where you write a novel in a month. But it was mid-November, so I was like, screw it, I can't do that. So I told myself, I'm going to actually write a book over the course of a month. I'm going to take some time and really do that. So I chose December because I had winter vacation, grading was wrapping up, I'd gotten a lot faster on blog comments and stuff, and so I really said, from 4 till 6:30 in the morning, I'm going to focus on writing. And so I did it. And really, my first draft was a mess. It was a mess. And then I really revised it over the course of the month of January.
Well, 4 to 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Dude. So, what time are you going to sleep? And what does your wife and family have to say? And how do you get the creative juices going at 4 o'clock in the morning?
That's that's funny. I go to bed at around 9:30.
Okay.
So I don't get the full 8 hours of sleep you're supposed to get, but
Sure.
yeah, part of it is just being in the habit of having little kids. You know how that is; they
Yeah.
interrupt you. And so, really, I mean, my time to be alone has always been 4 to 6:30. When I was working on my master's, it was that. Sometimes it's schoolwork, sometimes it's a blog post. So
it was already pretty much ingrained into your biological clock, as far as it wasn't all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to get up at 4 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah,
It was pretty seamless.
Yeah, and the other part, and this isn't a great thing, but every day my kids have 25 minutes of writing, where they do their public blogs, and that's where it's always a free write, always a free write. And sometimes I'll say, you know what, I really want you to have a persuasive expository and functional text within the next 2 weeks, or I might give some vague guidelines. And at the beginning of the year, I really walked around, monitored their writing. But then I realized there's a value in having them see me write as well. So another chunk of time was that 25 minutes a day. And a lot of times there was something about the environment of being around middle school that made it easier for me to write those characters, you know.
Well, that goes right into another question of mine is, what influence did your students have on you, on the characters, on Gabe, on just your mindset as you were writing?
I think I've been influenced by all of my interactions with students. And I actually had somebody criticize the book, which was fine, and say that he felt like my characters were too adult-like. They didn't act like middle school kids because of the depth of thought. And I think that's why I don't like some young adult literature, because I think adults make these assumptions about how shallow kids are.
Yeah.
I get it. Kids are emotionally insecure. But that only means they have a broader spectrum of emotion. Mm-hmm. They also have a broad spectrum of thought. And if I've learned anything about 8th graders in particular, but 7th graders too, it's that they are deep thinkers. They are also, they think deeply, they feel deeply, and they haven't abandoned those for the practical reality of life. So if anything, I'm often saddened by the fact that I have better, deeper interaction with 8th graders than I do with a crowd of adults at a party or something.
I know why I think that is. Why do you think it is? I think it's because they're not as calloused and jaded, and they're not as worried what other adults are going to say and like laugh or mock at them. Yeah. Why do you think, because I teach 8th graders also, and I've experienced the same thing as you have, why do you think 8th graders are able to have much more deeper conversations?
I think it's exactly that. I think they have this ability to think deep that we all have, but they haven't lost it. And then they're at an age where, I wouldn't say they've peaked at that age, but it's almost the opposite. They're beginning to think abstractly. They're beginning to think philosophically in a way that they haven't before. It doesn't have to be concrete. They also are, I think, more humble. I mean, they don't think that they've got the world figured out. You know, I can have an 8th grader will have a discussion about politics with no filter. Mm-hmm. And especially when it's an inner city school, there's really no filter because there's such a lack of background knowledge.
Sure.
That all of a sudden I get with a group of adults and they've got their political affiliations and they've got these things they've already thought through. It's like a checklist that they've already gone through. I've already figured out my thoughts on happiness and death and these huge existential issues that you shouldn't have figured out by the age of 30. But, you know, people have already either gone, this can't be answered, or I've already answered it.
Sure.
And that's the fun thing about 8th graders is they don't view life that way.
Yeah. Well, when I was reading it, I was really excited to see that depth of thought and questioning that your characters were having. Because like you, much of the teen literature that's out, it's just perpetuating the myth of middle school students, of junior high kids being totally flighty and
like
silly and everything. Exactly.
Yeah.
And my big thing right now is it's this and that. They are both that. They can be silly and goofy, but they also can be deep and critical. And so I was really glad that there was that opposite side. So I don't look at that as a criticism. I look at whoever wrote that, the students didn't seem like they were real teenagers. I looked at that as, well, that's awesome because that's just showing another side of junior high kids. And the bigger picture here is not what the adults think about the book, it's what the students think about the book. And there might be those kids, I know there's going to be those kids who read this and go, wow, this is reflecting me. I asked these deep questions. Because I know personally myself, I was like Gabe in that I was asking all these deep questions and wondering, and I saw through a lot of the BS that was going on around me. And is that, how much of Gabe is you?
Yeah,